So, Republicans held a hearing about fraud in Minnesota while, simultaneously defending a president who pardoned healthcare fraudsters who literally stole over $1 billion from Medicare, wiped out $1.3 billion in restitution owed to victims and taxpayers, and whose FBI director is currently flying his girlfriend around on a $60 million government jet. They call this oversight. I call it running the world's dumbest magic show, where they point at your left hand while robbing you with their right. Except, well, they're so bad at it, they're literally holding the hearing in the same room where they're doing the robbery. So here's what happened at the House Oversight Committee's big hearing on fraud in Minnesota. While Republicans spent hours grilling state officials about fraud in social programs, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett from Texas decided to do something revolutionary. She actually read the room and pointed out the galaxy-sized hypocrisy of Republicans clutching their pearls about fraud in Minnesota while ignoring the systematic corruption happening right in front of them in the Trump administration. And she didn't just make vague accusations. I mean, she came with receipts, entering article after article into the congressional record about Trump's pardon spree for massive Medicare fraudsters. Here's what happened.
All right, so let's get into it. We're living through the most corrupt presidential administration in American history, a $300 million ballroom, a $230 million payout from the Department of Justice because the president got his feelings hurt because he had to be investigated for being a criminal. Hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars spent at Trump-owned properties around the country, Trump-branded wine being sold at the Coast Guard exchanges, American taxpayer dollars being spent on DHS propaganda ads on Truth Social, awarding federal contracts to corporations in exchange for campaign contributions. Kash Patel flew his girlfriend around the country on a multi-million-dollar jet that taxpayers paid for. Kristi Noem gave companies she's affiliated with hundreds of millions of tax dollars, then went out and spent another $200 million on 2 private jets for her travel. For 12 months, this administration has been taking billions of taxpayer dollars from American people and have been giving it away to their own companies in the form of tax cuts, government contracts, or other government-funded subsidies. So Congress has a role in getting rid of fraud, I will admit that, in any federally funded government program. However, I think the fraud that the American people are concerned about is that the Republicans are taking away Americans' health care so that ultra-billionaires can get more tax cuts. The real fraud is the dehumanization and demonization of the working class Americans and immigrants to distract folks away from corporate socialism that's happening because of the Republicans. So this is truly the definition of throwing away the baby with the bathwater. The Republican philosophy is that if the cost of living for the average American increases, they're on their own. But if the cost of doing business increases for the wealthiest people on earth, well, then it's the government job to bail them out. But I want to get to my last question because, Mr. Ballou, I got to give you a chance. He's been issuing pardons for numerous people who have defrauded the American people. And Republicans on this committee, yeah, just as quiet as the room just got, right? So, Mr. Ballou, talk to me about how the Trump administration has welcomed fraud across government by purging DOJ attorneys and shuttering ethics office across the federal government.
Well, one of the things that's been a common theme in this discussion so far is potential government employee involvement in some of these schemes. That hasn't been proven yet, but it does seem to be alleged. The concern that I have is the office that would prosecute that in the Department of Justice, the Public Integrity Section, has been largely defunded and decimated.
Thank you so much. And my time has expired, but I do have some UCs, Mr. Chairman.
You want to do them now?
I do.
Okay.
The first one is from Truth Out. Trump grants clemency to executive who led $205 million Medicare fraud scheme.
Without objection, to ordered.
The next one is Trump commutes sentence of Dr. Salomon Melgen, eye doctor, found guilty of Medicare fraud.
Without objection, to ordered.
The next one, healthcare fraudster-Philip Esformes is latest Trump clemency recipient to be arrested. He defrauded more than $1 billion from Medicare.
Without objection, to ordered.
Trump pardons nursing home owner and supporter convicted of $7 million in tax evasion.
Without objection, to ordered.
Trump
and
pardons,
we'll want all that stuff to put in the record. So,
I will. I got you. Trump pardons cost victims and taxpayers $1.3 billion, House Judiciary Committee Democrats review says.
All right, without objection, so ordered.
Here's what you need to know that puts this in perspective. According to a June 2025 report from House Judiciary Committee Democrats, Trump's pardons wiped out approximately $1.3 billion in restitution and fines owed to victims and American taxpayers. That's not speculation, that's based on reviewing court documents and the Office of the Pardon Attorney's website. Let's talk about the specific people Crockett mentioned that Republicans had absolutely nothing to say about, right? Philip Esformes. According to PBS, he was convicted for what prosecutors described as one of the largest frauds in U.S. history, orchestrating a $1 billion Medicare fraud scheme through nursing homes and senior care facilities. The scheme was so brazen that prosecutors said he used narcotics like OxyContin and fentanyl to get patients addicted so they'd stay in his facilities and he could keep billing Medicare for their care. An FBI agent called him, quote, a man driven by almost unbounded greed. Trump commuted his sentence in December 2020. And then, and this is the kicker, Esformes was arrested again in 2024 on domestic violence charges, making him at least the seventh Trump clemency recipient to be charged with new crimes. Dr. Salomon Melgen. The Justice Department said Melgen, quote, callously took advantage of patients who came to him fearing blindness, end quote, and gave them, quote, medically unreasonable and unnecessary tests and procedures that victimized his patients and the American taxpayer, end quote. Prosecutors described his actions as, quote, truly horrific, end quote, barbaric and inhumane, end quote, noting these treatments, quote, involved sticking needles in their eyes, burning their retinas with a laser, and injecting dyes into their bloodstream, end quote. Between 2008 and 2013, Medicare paid this solo practitioner about $100 million. Trump commuted his sentence. Here's how this actually works and why it matters. Okay? When someone is convicted of fraud and ordered to pay restitution, that money is supposed to go back to the victims in these cases. Medicare, meaning you, the taxpayer, and the patients who were abused. But according to KFF Health News, Trump has granted pardons or commutations to at least 68 people convicted of fraud crimes in his first and second terms. And here's the crucial part. The House Judiciary Report found that at the time Trump pardoned January 6th insurrectionists, only 15% of the $3 million in restitution ordered to victims had been paid, with the remaining $2.6 million liquidated by the pardons. Now let's talk about the receipts Crockett didn't have time to get into. That $1.3 billion figure, it includes Ross Ulbricht, who owed $183,961,921 in restitution, Trevor Milton owing over $676 million to defrauded shareholders, and Jason Galanis, who had an $84.8 million restitution obligation, all wiped clean by Trump's pen. When someone asks you why this matters, tell them this. Traditional Justice Department standards require that people seeking pardons, quote, accepted responsibility for his or her criminal conduct and made restitution to its victims, end quote. Trump didn't just ignore that standard, he reversed it, letting criminals keep their stolen money while victims got nothing, honestly. And while we're on the topic of corruption Crockett mentioned, let's talk about Kash Patel. According to the New York Times, Patel has been using taxpayer-funded FBI jets for personal travel, including using a $60 million government jet to attend his girlfriend's performance at a wrestling event, and CBS News reported he's made multiple trips to Nashville, where his girlfriend lives, and to Las Vegas, where he has a home. The Daily Beast noted that when flying personal trips, FBI directors reimburse only the price of a commercial coach ticket. In Patel's case, a flight from State College to Nashville costs $239, leaving taxpayers on the hook for thousands of dollars per flight in jet fuel and landing fees. And the hypocrisy? According to the New Republic, in 2023, Patel argued the FBI should, quote, ground, end quote, former FBI Director Chris Wray's private jet, quote, that he pays for with taxpayer dollars to hop around the country, end quote. Then there's Kristi Noem. House Democrats reported that the Coast Guard entered into a contract to purchase 2 Gulfstream G700 luxury jets for Noem and the Deputy Secretary at a cost of $200 million during a government shutdown. According to the New York Times, Gulfstream advertises the G700 as, quote, the most spacious cabin in the industry, end quote, and the plane can be customized with up to 5 living areas, including a shower. The Washington Post reported Noem issued a directive mandating she personally approve any DHS contracts over $100,000, meaning she signed off on her own luxury jets. So what are Republicans really doing here? They're running a classic misdirection playpoint at fraud in Minnesota while ignoring systemic corruption at the federal level. When someone tries to tell you this hearing was about accountability, remind them. You can't hold a hearing about fraud while defending someone who pardoned the biggest healthcare fraudsters in American history and erased $1.3 billion in debts to victims and taxpayers. So what does this actually mean for you? When Trump pardons someone who stole from Medicare and wipes out their restitution, that money doesn't magically reappear. It's gone. According to the House Judiciary Report, Trump's pardons will, quote, severely deplete funds for victims' assistance and compensation programs, end quote, including the Victims of Crime Act grants, which are, quote, the primary source of federal funding for thousands of victim service providers, end quote, helping survivors of trafficking, domestic violence, sexual assault, and child abuse. It's like if your landlord raised your rent to pay for his yacht, except, in this case, the yacht belongs to convicted fraudsters and you're paying for it through depleted victim services. The same taxpayer dollars they claim to be protecting in Minnesota are being actively stolen at the federal level, and they're fine with it. Here's what this means institutionally. Presidential pardons have traditionally been reserved for people who've paid their debts and shown remorse. But CBS News reported that Trump's acts of clemency often release criminals with, quote, no further fines, restitution, probation, or other conditions, end quote, a complete departure from established practice. Tim McCormack, who represented a whistleblower in a fraud case, told the Chicago Sun-Times that, quote, these pardons send the message that if you are rich and connected and powerful enough, then you are above the law, end quote. And adversaries are watching when America's president openly rewards billion-dollar fraudsters while his administration officials burn through taxpayer money on luxury jets. It broadcasts to the world that our system is for sale. And for what? Republicans claim they're protecting taxpayer dollars. But in 2025, Trump told Congress he'd found, quote, hundreds of billions of dollars of fraud, end quote, without citing any specific examples. Meanwhile, experts told KFF Health News that the president's claimed focus on fraud, quote, appears to be a pretext for slashing spending that has been legally appropriated by Congress, end quote, using fraud as an excuse to cut programs while actual fraudsters walk free with billions. It's the same playbook Trump's been running since his first casino went bankrupt. Claim you're fighting waste while enriching yourself and your allies. But this isn't really about fraud, is it? This is about whether we're going to pretend that accountability means something when Republicans hold hearings about fraud in blue states while ignoring systematic corruption in their own administration. This is about whether we're going to accept a reality where healthcare executives who tortured elderly patients for profit walk free, while Republicans lecture Democrats about fiscal responsibility. The darker truth? They're not even trying to hide it anymore. They're holding the fraud hearing and defending the fraudsters in the same breath because they've learned they can do both without consequence. At least when I try to have my cake and eat it too, I have the decency to feel guilty about it. When someone asks you about this hearing, tell them the truth. You can't drain the swamp while filling it with convicted fraudsters who stole billions, but you can hold a hearing pretending you care while they cash their pardons. If you enjoyed this content and you want to see more and support independent media, please subscribe to this channel. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching.